I don't think that they need to make drastic adjustments going into the next game, right? I mean, you don't overreact to Brunson getting 38, right? You don't. But Alex, is there one adjustment? I mean, they got to shoot better. That's not an adjustment. And Jimmy's ankle, that's not an adjustment. So what does Spoelstra do? Or if Jimmy is hobbled but plays on Friday, is there an adjustment that you do need to make there, particularly defensively?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, there's a couple ways that this can go. I mean, you just got to see what's going on with Jimmy. Assuming he's playing, I don't think there's any major adjustment that needs to be made. In fact, I like some of the things that they were leaning into offensively tonight as far as the actions with, like I mentioned before, just kind of revving up even more the actions involving Jalen Brunson, making him defend. And I think they've really taken advantage of him overall this series, and that's one of the biggest reasons Max has gotten off, because he's often on Max. More of that. That's great. I love the way that they engage Mitchell Robinson a little bit more the past couple of games. I think he is prone to foul trouble. You want to bring him up into space offensively. And I think mostly what you saw tonight, this is the first game where Thibodeau's game plan has really worked out for his team. Because I think they've done a decent job, the Knicks have overall, of enforcing their game plan, where they're really sending the help towards the paint. And the Heat have done a good job countering with just the extra ball movement and really leaning into that stuff. I think tonight they did a little bit too much, specifically Jimmy Butler. I think so many opportunities for him, even with all the bodies that are being sent there. And yes, there are very short windows where he has somebody one-on-one. It's like a second or less, because they're not actual windows with how many bodies they're sending at him. He's got to do a better job of finding the creases, initiating contact the way that he usually does. He just told me last game, and it could have been a bluff, right? It could have been a bluff, but he just told me last game he loves getting double teamed and that he wants to see if he can score over the double teams. We
Look
know
at the
that he
rim,
can find
Jimmy.
those creases. Yes, that's the thing. He was looking like Bam in some of those. No disrespect towards Bam. I'm just saying, like, there was times where he wasn't even looking. And you guys know me. I'm a Bam defender till the end. But, like, he is supposed to be the primary scorer. He's got to look at the rim. And even if they're going to send all those bodies, you have to actually collapse first. He did it sometimes, and he really left his mark on the other stuff. Like, he did a great job defensively, like Brady mentioned. Did a good job playmaking and rebounding. All that stuff was great. There was some off-ball buckets. Overall, Jimmy has to be more aggressive and at the very least getting into the paint and collapsing. And he's got to get more shots up. Like that mid-range shot he had in the fourth quarter was a perfect example. There was a second window where he had, was it Grimes one-on-one there? And he just, went up and took that shot. He's got to do a little bit more of that.
I want to address a couple things in the comments here because I'm going through them. Okay, let's start here. Jimmy being up, drinking wine, or posting on IG is not the reason that he struggled tonight. Trust me, there are a lot worse things that he and other guys could be doing and have done before playoff games. All right. The other thing is he's not point shaving or anything like that. Essentially, okay, I think I don't think he felt comfortable on the ankle. I don't, because to me, he doesn't. I understand there have been games this season where he's been not that aggressive and he passes out of shots and all that, but he hasn't been doing that in the postseason, and they clearly wanted to end it tonight. It just looked like he didn't have confidence in it for whatever reason. And again, the Spoelstra's not going to talk about it. Jimmy's not going to talk about it. He's going to be put probably on the injury report as questionable, okay, which he was tonight, I believe. And we'll basically find out right before game time what the situation is. So I don't think this was anything about it. Anything other than him being in some discomfort tonight. And again, I'm not going to excuse the rest of the performance for the loss, okay? They did not play well enough tonight. They were not on point, particularly at the start of the third quarter. To me, that's where this thing started to go away. They could have imposed their will on them, gotten the crowd out of it. We had Brian Fonseca there on scene today, and he was saying they were booing Randall when he came back into the game after his first stint. The Heat could not build on that momentum tonight, and that was the problem. And then once the crowd started to get into it, and then I hated the Mitchell Robinson hacka thing at the end of the game, the crowd got really into it. Miami seemed rattled. Lowry picks up the fifth foul. Spo takes him out. And look, the thing with Duncan Robinson is this, and I give Duncan great credit for staying ready the same way I used to give James Jones great credit for staying ready. And I even said Duncan should take every shot here. But the problem is it gets them out of what they have done. right? Because Duncan has not been a featured part of the offense for the entire year. And so then it's like when Duncan missed a couple and he had a couple that swirled in and out and he had one on the break, they can't get back to what they usually do. And it felt like they got out of sorts. Bam got forgotten. Jimmy wasn't being aggressive and they couldn't kind of get over the hump. Combination of things that happened tonight. Greg, as you look ahead to the next game, you feel they're going to close it out. I feel they're going to close it out, provided that Jimmy's healthy. But is there anything concerning tonight?
I mean, the only thing would be Jimmy not looking at the basket, and if that is something that we're going to see a ton of in Game 6, how they adjust. I just think Spoelstra now is going to go back to the drawing board on how he defends Randall, Brunson, and Barrett, but primarily Brunson. And I think that they can do some different things. And if any of the shooting can just get a little bit of a spike back home, I feel like they close it out. It's watching Jimmy early for me. That'll be the biggest thing going into Game 6 that I'll be watching for, because that's the element, right? If Jimmy all of a sudden doesn't look like playoff Jimmy, then this is a new series. But if they can just close this out and give Jimmy another week to rest, that would be huge. And then let's hope Philly and Boston go for 7. So,
well, that's the other part of this. You kind of blew an opportunity here to get Jimmy and Bam some extra rest if you end up closing this thing out before the next round. Our guy Gad tweeted this out. I saw you put this in our chat. Greg, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo combined for the same amount of field goal attempts, 23, as Duncan Robinson and Kevin Love, 23. Not a winning formula. It was their only formula to get back in the game in the second half because Duncan started to get it going. But the other thing about it, Brady, was because Duncan started to get it going, Spoelstra didn't play the other guy who had it going a little bit, was Max. So it was kind of one or – because you couldn't play them both defensively, right? But it kind of became one or the other with nobody else scoring.
And I feel like that's the balance that we've been talking about all season, the regular season. It was like certain nights – there was never consistency on either end during the regular season. It was like some nights they had the shooting, some nights they didn't have the defense, some nights it was the opposite. It was like – that's what this felt like. It was like this didn't feel like a scenario where you were going to lean defense, but it did not feel like a scenario where you could put both of your shooters out there and then let Brunson have – pick your poison on which guy he wanted to be his screener. So it was like you had to pick one. Even though Max had the hot start, it definitely felt like the way Duncan ended that quarter, they definitely had to stick with him. They just had to. And I thought they got good things out of it. I thought it was funny, actually. They ran the exact same play like the entire final 6 minutes of the fourth quarter. They just kept running the same double drag. Jimmy has a ball handler, Duncan and Bam screening. And it was like, that's what they got the Jimmy pull up out of the timeout with. That was what they got so many looks with. And it was like, I thought at times they were getting good looks out of it. And it was just, that's why it really comes back to this. As much as we want to focus on all these things, it was like, Miami just didn't play well. It's really that simple. So we can sit here and look into this move by Spoelstra to do the hack of Robinson or different parts of the game. But it was like, Jimmy didn't play well and the shooters didn't play well. And if that happens, you're not going to win most basketball games. And somehow they were in it because of the defense and the fact that the Knicks seem to just play themselves into those situations sometimes. But they had no business being in that position, to be honest, with the way they played early in the game. So that's where I think there's a certain level of confidence heading into Game 6, because you probably say to yourself, even with the injury, you're not going to see that Jimmy Butler again. And ideally, I guess you wouldn't shoot like that again. But the funny thing is, like we've been saying, what did they end up at? They ended up at 30%, which is pretty much around where they've been all series. That's where these things get weird. But I just feel like it was just so loud the way they shot in this game. Like there's the past games where I know it's because they won and we could say that. But when they didn't shoot well in these past games, you didn't even realize it. Like you were kind of like, oh, because everything else was flowing so naturally, and that's probably the Jimmy factor. It was just kind of demoralizing, like in a lot of ways, with the way that the shooting was going. Like they were just guys like Love just kept getting shots up.
Well, this was the one game where the offense bled into the defense, and that's the thing that Jimmy talked about during the regular season. Where they weren't shooting the ball well, and then it would affect them on the other end. They did create some turnovers tonight. That wasn't so much the problem, but just that certain points of the game where they needed to be on point, they weren't.